Kim. Okay, let's try to start this last session of this first day of the EuCNC conference. First of all, many thanks for being there, and first of all, many thanks also for the distinguished panel that we have managed to assemble. I mean, we have the privilege of having very highly respected people and prominent persons in their companies to share with us tonight their views on 6G and on the road towards 6G. So I have assembled just one slide where you have the affiliation of the various speakers, which will save us a little bit of time before presenting the full CV, because I think it would take quite a lot of time if we if we want to introduce all what you did in your career. Anyway, on the website you have more information on the detailed, let's say, CV of the speakers. Unfortunately, the lady from Microsoft, Micaela Giuhat, will not be with us tonight, so I apologize for that. She missed her plane. And at this moment in time, we will start the session. I have also to introduce myself. I used to be Deputy Head of Unit for Future Connectivity Systems in the European Commission until end of March, but at this moment in time I retired, so I will act as moderator in my own capacity of good faith and good willing person. As we say in French, Monsieur Loyal. I don't know if you understand this type of analogy. But now I think we can go into the real discussion. This panel has been designed as a dialogue, so it's just for having a question and eventually answers. So what I suggest is that we can try to address a number of topics which have been addressed already today and yesterday in the workshops, but to give, let's say, a high-level perspective from our speakers today. I will try to follow a pattern which is basically based on the applications, the sustainabilities, the technologies, and try to see what are the various let's say directions in this type of topics. So my first question that I would address to the panel is in relation to applications and 6G applications. I think we have been looking into it for already some time. I mean, the ExaX project, which is the flagship project of the European Commission, is looking into a number of use cases, 5 categories of use cases, about 30 different types of use cases. We can see many type of ideas which are being floated around today. It seems that immersive environment, digital twins, as was presented this morning by the keynote speaker of Ericsson in very interesting presentation, are kind of very, let's say, fashionable concepts, if I may say so. But there was also in the presentation of the keynote this morning a very interesting slide on applications which are built over time on top of the 5G experience. And I think it was very interesting to see this slide that proposed an evolution path from 5G, enhancing the applications little by little to move into eventually something which is 6G oriented in terms of applications. And on the other hand, very different, maybe more sophisticated, more exotic type of applications such as joint communication and sensing. So my question to the panel would be, what are your views in terms of future applications for 6G? Do you believe that there are very specific applications that we have to concentrate on at this moment in time, that we can build on to generate the ecosystems? Because at this moment in time, we have a perspective which is very wide. But in 5G, we could see that at some stage, the discussion was crystallizing on very specific type of applications. EMBB, for instance, was the first application type that came into the standardization bodies. And later, from a European perspective also, we managed to involve a first set of verticals, which was automotive and then factories. So are there similar views that we can expect for 6G, that there will be some sort of front runners which we have to capitalize on to develop the systems early today? Or do we still have to keep the perspective extremely widely open because we are really far too early in the process. I don't know who would like to answer this one. Maybe we can go in sequence, or if you don't mind, as you like.
Okay, I can start. I think we should look and learn from what's happening now the coming years on 5G, and the things that takes off in 5G is of course candidate to enhance and drive even stronger than in 6G. So because I think we need a business case, we need a success, we need to motivate investment. So then of course you would like to look for applications which are moving fast and ahead of others. But you never know what then actually will be the killer applications, or so we need to keep it broad. But if I were to select something, I would look for the leading applications in 5G and make them even stronger. And I really hope that XR is one of these, the mixed reality type of applications.
Yeah, to build on that, I think every generation has a new defining application, but also delivers on what the previous generation promised to do, but do it at better efficiency, better performance, and at scale. So 5G, the promise is industrial automation. I think in 6G, we will see it happen at scale with better efficiency. But at the same time, the new application that many of us see as a vision is that digital physical fusion. And that is actually a whole plethora of known and yet unknown applications. And what I think is important to make that happen is that we have a platform approach, so that we have the ability that multiple actors in that digital physical fusion can participate. There will be people that have sensor infrastructure that they make available to keep the digital twin up to date. That can be cars, that can be radio sensors, joint communication and sensing, there can be video sensors, but then you have people that have the AI models that make it happen, then you have actors that will develop the application, then you have the network providers. So have an infrastructure that allow for that collaborative approach. I think that will be very important for 6G.
Okay.
Yeah, I think similar view. As previous generation, the new generation will fulfill the application more virtual, created from 5G. That's for 6G point of view. But what will be the dominant application carried forward by 6G will be the AI type of a service. So that is the new thing that we really need to study more. Because it's a kind of a disruption, because the pervasive of AI usage, and especially the AI will get into a domain with a very tight loop of a physical world and a digital world interaction. This was not happening in the previous generation, so it's more in the cloud. But this tight interaction with the physical world and the digital world, that is the new AI will definitely drive this.
So AI is the key word, is the buzzword. Eric, you have some ideas on that? Or?
Yeah, actually I agree with everything which has been said by my colleagues. One thing that we think is very important is that we make sure that those services that we are imagining for our future customers, they answer an actual need of our customers, because we have been always in the technology push attitude, and it's important also that we make sure that what we imagine for the people will meet their need, so that in the end there will be successful adoption of the technology, and so a sustainable business for us. And for that, we think it's important that even in the early stages of 6G, where we still would have ideas about what could be the opportunities opened by the technology, that we make a connection with the citizens, with the future industrial users, and test our ideas, get their feedback, and together build a technology that will meet in the end the needs and the market, and get confidence on that.
Okay. Maybe I would like just to pick on the platform approach that you mentioned, Peter. this platform approach, if I understand well, kind of drives a certain level of openness of the platform, which is going to be available to the potential developers. So it means that there is a certain level of exposure of the functionalities in the network that has to be reached towards potential developers. I mean, in 5G, this is already happening. I understand that there is this CAPIF Common API framework, for instance, which is developed in 3GPP that allows already some exposure of functionalities. Now, is this something that is appealing to the operators? I mean, are the operators really ready to open their network and expose functionalities for third-party developers, which at the end of the day might mess up their resource or might make some control that they don't like? I mean, how do you make that happen in business terms? Maybe it's more a question for the operating side, but feel free to answer.
Yeah, so absolutely. First, we think that indeed in the future we need to consider our network, our infrastructures as platforms to enable business, new business, also because we know that already, and we see that coming already, the end-to-end service delivered to a customer does not always rely only on our networks. I mean, that's true for roaming, obviously, when you're abroad, but with the advent of non-public networks, part of the infrastructure to deliver service to some verticals will use their own infrastructure in addition to the public network operator infrastructure. And that will happen quite soon. So now the question, and this is a question that we are thinking of internally, is what should we open exactly? Because of course we don't want to give all the keys to others. We spend a lot of time designing, optimizing, securing our network, and of course we want to keep the control on it. So there is a trade-off here to find. We have not yet found the sweet spot, but this is an active topic of thinking internally.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think we have been sort of from vendor side and operators, we have felt that we had over-the-top services taking a lot of the value, right? And I think, so we have been perhaps thinking a little bit on how to get around that. And I think the answer is a little bit the opposite, right? We should make the over-the-top even more richer and possibilities, but it should be through an API. It should be possible to monetize that over-the-top services, because the nice thing with over-the-top is that it works across operators, across countries, across vendors, right? And so that's a very good property. But offering more richer network capabilities then to making more advanced over-the-top services, I think that's the key. And that should be through exposure and APIs and monetization built in from the start, I think, in order to get a more even distribution of the values of this.
Yeah. No, I want to build on that. So yes, open programming interfaces to allow for richer use of the network capabilities, but we should also shield the complexity of the network and have what we call intent-based programming interfaces, where we use such things as large language models to make that translation between an intention, something that the application developer understands, and then something that then the network can implement in an efficient way. And because you mentioned over the top, I think we should be a bit cautious that the platform doesn't become the default platform of over-the-top players, the big web scalers, that we really allow for a collaborative ecosystem and not a monopoly and a lock-in to. So we need to also act fast as an industry there.
Okay.
Yes. So the platform approach is the industry DNA or tradition. That's all the mobile industry do. And then the openness is because there is a community, a domain of speciality. It's not every open that for the other community to use is convenient. Sometimes you open more, they cannot have the capability to use this. So I'm pretty much agree with what you said. we need to have some other technology to enable this. Auto GTP could be one good example, that from a very high level intent, then through technology translate the enable different parts of the network. So those are the different technology approach.
Okay, so I take it as a kind of interim conclusion that we have to continue the platform approach, which has been, I think, also very much reflected in the SNS program, 6G SNS JU program of the European Commission. Try to give some control to the users, some power to the users, and also I take from the discussion that it's maybe a little bit too early to focus on dedicated specific applications, but I would also tend to believe that if the standardization process is supposed to start in 2025, where we will have a standardization proposals for release 20 a little bit before, there is not much time to try to understand if there are already dedicated applications that we have to concentrate on for the first phase of standardization. So I think this is a subject of reflection, in my view, that the community should potentially address. Because if we gamble on the wrong horse at some stage, we might see that the developments will be done for the US ecosystem or for the Asian ecosystem, but not necessarily for the European ecosystems, assuming that they are different. Now, the beauty would be if we can have a global ecosystem, but 5G showed that it was not exactly possible with EMBB developing in the US and in Asia, the vertical story being more prominent in Europe and possibly in China as well. So it was not exactly along the same line, the priorities of the different regions. Yes, please, Eric.
An additional comment on that. Standardization is not the end, of course. Usually what we do is that we are building a toolbox, and then depending on the several years after, depending on the interest of the market, then vendors can make informed choices about what exactly to develop, what to build into products, so that we operators, we can, and then of course we operators, we can also choose what we want to deploy. But so we don't need already from the standardization to have absolutely clear ideas about what will be the applications. Of course, the earlier we know, the better it is, because then we can put more focus on some particular directions. And I was using the term of toolbox, and then build the right tools to put inside the toolbox. But still, we still have years to decide in the end what will be implemented and what will be deployed, even after standardization, I mean.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective as well. Maybe at this stage, we can maybe open the discussion to the audience on the very specific subject of applications and what are the kind of applications that 6G will stimulate or that will stimulate 6G. I don't know if there is one or two questions on this particular topic. Yes, I don't see very well, but it seems that there is a question here because I'm a bit under the spotlight. Yes, Emmanuel, if you want to ask your question. On n'entend rien.
I would like to come back to the platform and to the applicability and enabling of 6G. Because you're talking about network sometimes, you're talking about AI, there is computing everywhere, there is a need of security. For your point of view, where is a single-stop shop where we will do and use the openness maybe, of all those multilateral approaches and providers of pieces of services? Are we still in the OSI model with just one layer for everybody, with de facto no differentiation of service? Who will be the main actor? Is it network-centric? Is it computing-centric? Who will take the lead on that? Cool.
It's a good question because there's no single answer to that. I think we need to be ready for scenarios. There is indeed the emergence of the web scalers, and I think a bit of a threat of them becoming the dominant platform, and then, yeah, you're locked in, or the more open distributed approach. And yes, the network, but also the cloud compute continuum in an integrated approach, right? And there are also other distributed business models that are emerging with Web 3.0 technology, where different players can, in a distributed way, collaborate, exchange trust, and also exchange value through crypto technologies.
But you see my point. If you want to value everything we are doing, including in the research programs and so on. We need to have, we don't have today even the ability to expose the quality of what is given, provided by the network in terms of security, QoS, and everything. We have some of the API, through the APIs and so on, but there is no standards, and so there is no way to value this. And I'm not entering the free share debate and the net neutrality, but there is some pieces missing somewhere. And today, if you want a digital service, the natural way, maybe not to go to the network provider. It's an open question, but I guess it's a challenge for all of us.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone want to answer. I mean, Emmanuel, just to answer, I'm not the one who should answer, but just to make the remark that, if I remember well, this is an issue which is well recognized in the SNS work program to ensure end-to-end quality security across heterogeneous domains is primarily one topic of the research which we are which the Commission is trying to stimulate these days. So I see it as an open perspective from the SNS 6G program. Now, maybe the real people have their own ideas on how this can be achieved. When you cut across multiple domains, you have a network which is implemented part in a vertical, part in an hyperscaler, part in a CSP. So you have this end-to-end characteristics, and you have to ensure the end-to-end security. So is it through a third-party provider? Is it through a concatenation of resources across domain? Is it through a certification mechanism? Honestly, I don't know. There are probably many, many views on that, that possibly you can maybe tell us what are your views on that.
Yeah, I think you actually partly answered here, because it is really an ecosystem with many players. And it's not possible for one player to guarantee an end-to-end quality of service and security, etc. The vendors will, of course, need to make systems that could be configured in the right way. Then they need to be installed and operated in the right way. Devices needs to be, of course, providing the right security and applications on top of that. So I think to have this trustworthiness, security through the full application is really a collaboration in the ecosystem. That's my view.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, one also wonders how do you orchestrate such a network of networks and continuum of compute. And we need to think scenario where you have federated approaches, but we also need to think, okay, is there one control entity or a marketplace that takes care of that orchestration in a hierarchical approach? So we need to be prepared for scenario thinking.
And coming back to the question about is there a one-stop shop, I think that really depends on the service. And coming back to my roaming example, when there will be NTN, and when you will have the possibility to roam to zones covered with satellite, for instance, I mean, here again, you could subscribe directly, subscription to a satellite operator, or you could have an agreement between an operator like Orange and another satellite operator, and then part of your subscription, then you would have this access to satellite constellations, and when you would be out of the terrestrial coverage, then you would switch to satellite coverage. And that's a very possible model.
Yeah, so I guess pretty much agree. This is the composition of the ecosystem. So 6G as a whole is too big for single vendor, single country, or single service provider. So it is a summation of the entire ecosystem to deal with. So we don't see even the feasibility for a dominant vendor or service provider even in the 6G scenario.
Okay, maybe we can move on to the next set of questions. I think we have addressed to an extent the let's say the application type of let's say domain with the various possible approaches towards research and investigation into this domain. Now, maybe one domain which has come up very prominently over the last 2 days, which is quite not unusual, but which is quite a bit different from 5G is this idea of sustainability. I mean, sustainability seems to be now one of the big things which is being discussed in the 6G, let's say, circles. There are many dimensions of sustainability, so maybe not to diverge too much because there are other sessions which are discussing about sustainability. Maybe you can just focus on the part, I think, which was already addressed this morning a bit in the keynote speech, about energy efficiency. So my question would be, how do you see the possibility to be better in terms of energy efficiency for future network platforms? Because this seems to be a bit of a kind of very difficult requirements. On the one hand, you go much faster, you have much lower latency, you add additional frequency bands, and in the end, you are much more performant in terms of energy efficiency. So this logically doesn't sound very easy to to realize. So I don't know if we have to do it like in 5G, where when people say that 5G is more efficient, they say it's in terms of energy per bit. So it's clear that in terms of energy per bit, 5G is much more efficient than 4G. For all sorts of reasons. But now, can we do better in 6G? And can we even go beyond what 3GPP has already provided in sort of all tricks with the dormant modes and this type of things? Or do we have to concentrate more on the energy saving at the level of the applications? That means the use case that runs on top of the platform. For instance, there are not so many, but there are a few studies that shows that if you use connected cars with network platforms that tells you exactly the way to go and the optimized route, you can save, I don't know, 50% of energy consumption, this type of thing. So should we put the priority in one or the other domain, or again, look at everything from a holistic perspective? How do you see the most promising routes to achieve this type of goals?
Okay, maybe I will take. Yeah, so the sustainability is becoming more critical for 6G. At the previous generation, we didn't take this as an important indicator, but now the sustainability become almost make and break. But the crisis at the moment is moving either 5G evolution or 6G evolution. Is the computing explosion when the application goes very diverse and also computing intensive. This is the driving factor, and the Moore's law stopped basically. The leverage to resolve the computing side is limited. There is limited space. So this long-term wise, this is one bottleneck. The other one is the spectrum-wise move to the higher frequency. Also increase, have to manage the power efficiency for the higher frequency communication. So these are the two technical challenge, and the rest one has to be a community effort. Somehow in the requirement stage, or even later on with the regulatory stage, has to reinforce the sustainability.
Maybe I can build on that. Actually, 10 years ago, I worked in a consortium called Green Touch. I think you were also part of that. And there we had that ambitious goal of a factor of 1,000 improvement in energy efficiency. And we have seen that you can do it and that you also need to do it. We predicted that it will come to this stage. So we have still the ambition for 6G. Traffic will go up by an order of magnitude depending on what forecast you use, 20, 30. And at the same time, you want to reduce the power consumption by at least 50%. So that is our goal. And it can be done. There's multiple things. On the ASIC level, yes, I agree, Moore's law is saturating in efficiency, but you can look at new concepts of mixed signal compute. For the AI, you can look at compute in memory and such concepts. So there's new ASIC architectures to look at. At the radio, which is still 70% of the power consumption in a network, there's multiple things that you can do. So that is the footprint. But I think we also need to address the handprint. What you said, can we help as a network? Because network power consumption is 2%, depending on the predictions, maybe 6%. But there's a lot more power consumption that we can help with to make it efficient in the power grid, in transportation, by leveraging the network capabilities. And I think also there we have a responsibility, the handprint and the footprint.
Yeah, I think a good thing with the current energy crisis is that it has become much more now in focus to reduce energy consumption in existing networks. So I guess we had a lot of things in the drawers that has not been implemented, it was not asked for, etc. But now, of course, everything is done in order to make the current networks as energy efficient as possible. So that's something, of course, a high priority now, short term. Then looking forward, I think the full potential of 5G is not yet utilized still, because it also takes the hardware platforms to evolve and really make full use of the sort of sleep possibilities and all of the things that we have built into the 5G standard. So there we also have a journey to do. And of course, these things should continue going into 6G. And then I think we have sort of taken a little bit of free lunches, because there were a few free lunches here, because 4G was not really optimized for it in the same way. So it will, of course, be more and more of a challenge to reduce even further when we are now looking at 6G. So that's a really interesting now research field to try to address and find solutions beyond sort of the obvious ones. One thing which I think we should look at is, of course, the integration between the radio networks, the communication networks, and the compute networks, and sort of the grid, the smart grid. Because I think there are gains of using batteries that we anyhow have in the radio networks, because we need them as backup. You can use them in combination with green energy sources, which is more fluctuating, so to say. And it's really the CO2 footprint which is the problem, right? So if we can move, that's of course also an important aspect.
Operator's perspective?
Yes. As you know, sustainability is a topic which is dear to our heart in Orange. And just about your initial questions, which was, should we have some priorities between footprint, working on applications? I mean, we should do everything we could, of course, to maximize first the negative impacts of the technology that we are designing, and also the positive impacts that we are generating in other sectors of the society. But just focusing on the energy efficiency. First, energy efficiency was one of the design criterion of 5G. And that's why we implemented those long periods where the base station doesn't transmit anything in case there is no traffic. But then I agree with Magnus, we have not fully exploited that yet, because the point is that you can shut down all the radio parts of the base station when there is no traffic. But the problem is not to shut them down. The problem is to turn them back on when there is traffic, because that takes some time. So that means you need to anticipate, predict when there will be traffic, so that you can turn back the equipment slightly in advance, so that they are on when there is a need for using them. And for that, we are still researching some solutions. AI can help, but we are not using fully that possibility. And that leads us to one of the things that we are really calling for 6G, is to have this possibility of consuming 0 watt when there is zero load, which is not the case today, because if there is zero load, still your base station is on and you are consuming energy. And so you are wasting energy somehow. And having the right processes, that certainly can take, touch different parts, hardware design, optimization, sleep modes, AI, as I was referring to. There are many levers to play on in order to reach that objective. And of course, it's not only having 0 watt at 0 load, but having also the power consumption to scale progressively with the traffic. So if you have a small amount of traffic, then you should have a small amount of power consumption. Mm-hmm. So that's a very important design criterion for 6G in our view. And also, I would like to stress that environmental sustainability is not only about energy consumption, because even, I mean, we have made some studies internally in Orange, and even if we were using 100% renewable energy, still it would just remove 20% of our CO2 emissions. And all the rest is on plenty of different factors. I'm not going into the details, but we need also to take into account if we talk in terms of CO2, the CO2 impact of the equipment that we are installing, because they are generating, I mean, they are based on mining activity, then manufacturing, then transportation, and so on and so on. And finding ways also to reduce the amount of new equipments is also one direction. And for that, ensuring that the equipments are modular so that you can repair only the pieces which needs to be repaired. Also, maximizing the solutions for sharing equipment between operators. That's also a way to reduce this global impact of our industries. And there is a lot of gain to be reaped off in that direction.
I may be wrong, but it seems there are a lot of good ideas which are on the table at this moment in time on how to progress further on this particular element. But I was a little bit under the impression, especially listening to the ExaX workshop yesterday, that we still are missing modeling and how to model the impact of various technologies in the network. I give you a simple example. For instance, the NextG Alliance in the US, they have a report on sustainability. I think they come somewhere to the conclusion that using NFV implementation saves energy, but it's not so much expressed in, let's say, rational terms. The idea behind is that if you implement a function in NFV, you can activate it only when you need it, and it's not active all the time. So from that perspective, you will save energy. But there is no real model that says how much you can quantify that and how this is going to materialize when you have this implementation in your network. And what I have seen over the last few months, when I was still working with the SNS colleagues in the Commission, is that we try to push this idea of sustainability, especially energy efficiency, in the context of the ITU vision documents, which is to be delivered in the next few months. But apparently there is some resistance in the ITU domain to take this as a framing specification or as a framing objective, because there is no real way which is identified today to measure that. Because once you specify something, ITU will develop the measurement models, and they will then test the specification of 3GPP against their measurement model. And apparently for the sustainability issue, it's much more difficult to have this type of measurement framework. And this creates, apparently, what I understand, some resistance. So what can we do to change that? I mean, it seems we are... When we say the next generation should be 1 terabit, I mean, to measure 1 terabit is something that the stakeholders know how to do that. To say it has to be 90% more energy efficient, it's something which the models need to be developed against what it is that we measure. I don't know if this is something you share, but this is the impression I had when listening to the various speakers.
First, there has been a lot of progress in evaluation of environmental impact of what we do. Just talking about the products that exist today, now systematically there are life cycle analyses which are being performed by the vendors. And this is very good because it allows us also to have a clear idea when we compute our global impact of having some precise values for at least that part. Then about ITU, I think that has a lot to do with the way ITU works. The way ITU works is that they take proposals from 3GPP, for instance, and then for some aspects they make simulations, for other aspects they just look at the specifications and then they say, okay, pass or fail. But when it comes to energy efficiency, it doesn't depend only on your specifications on your air interface. It depends also on the way it's implemented, and that ITU has no means to checking that. So there are things which you can do by looking at specifications, and there are other things that you cannot. And yes, that poses the question of how you can connect some impacts that do not depend on specifications with just looking at the specification, and basically you cannot. So we need to find, if we want that to be a criterion in ITU, we need to find the right way of evaluating it. But does it fit really ITU? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, probably there will be some regulatory framework established then, and has to be global as well. Then that will start to, reinforce in the end this sustainability.
Okay. Any comment on that?
I agree. There's an important role for the regulator. It's when the regulator imposes energy limits, then the oranges of this world start banging on our head to reduce the power consumption of our equipment. And yes, you can have maybe standard approaches of how to measure it, but you are already doing an intake of which vendor provides me the most energy efficient equipment. And,
it's not only the regulator. You yourself, you presented your target of 50% reduction.
Yeah,
this was presented yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
but this is inspired by what the regulator wants to do, right? It's being responsible. But we see also, and it's a regulator on one hand, but I sometimes say green networks, green is also the color of money. In the end, it hits your TCO cost also, your battery cost, your energy cost. So also that is a way to measure your power consumption, your energy consumption in the end.
Any view on that?
I agree. I think it's an important role for regulators and then of course for operators and then for vendors. So yeah, we are in this together.
Maybe we can do the same. Any question from the audience on sustainability story or energy efficiency story to be a bit more focused?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Joseph Noll, former head of the group developing 3G, always online, always connected. Now I'm with the University of Oslo, and I had a good chat with Doreen Bogdan, our ITU head. And in that chat, we discussed a bit, the story of the fish and the hunger. Give a man a fish, give a man a fishing stick, learn him how to fish, and then he will not have any hunger. What you remind me on are the boys who talk about the fishing stick. The paradigm of today is get the girls to school and get them educated, and then you change the society. What I'm challenging you is, when the title is Dialogue with Industry Leaders, how do the industry leaders see the connectivity of all children of this world in all schools in rural areas, given that 95% of the schools in Africa south of Sahara are unconnected?
That's the question that dates back to 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. So now we have it again in 6G. But okay, I don't know if any one of you want to answer that.
We're shifting gear from energy. Sustainability is indeed also inclusiveness and connecting everybody and everything, right? And you already asked the question this morning during the keynote. And Magnus gave actually a very good answer. We shall leverage satellites to provide the backhaul and then provide local connectivity at an affordable cost. And I think we have a responsibility as an industry to provide connectivity at a low cost. And it's not only in the rural areas, I would say even in developed countries, in urban poor, providing connectivity. There are school kids that are camping out of a Starbucks just to get their homework done. So providing solutions that are affordable broadband for also these communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's just to complement. I think that this is a problem that goes far beyond technology. Of course, as you said, the industry has the responsibility to provide affordable cost solutions. But then even if some affordable cost solution, from our perspective, it doesn't mean that all the schools in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, will be connected, because you will still need to buy handsets. And there will be a need for people to have enough resource to make the necessary purchase of the equipment, and then they will need also to have the skills to know how to use them. There was some statistic, I forgot exactly what the figure, but you have a quite large number of people who are on the network coverage, they still are not connected because they don't know how to, or because they don't have the resource to buy the necessary equipment. So then there is a need for certainly either socially, I'm not sure about the word in English, but well, social offers, and in Orange we do that. We have some offers which are directed for the people who have a low amount of resources. But of course, industry cannot replace the public powers. At some point, governments also need to put public money into making sure that the people who have low amount of resource, they can get access to connectivity. And then you need to have the skills. So for that, you need to have education programs to learn to the people how to use a smartphone. Not everyone knows how to use a smartphone. We all know elder people, even in Europe, they don't know how to, they don't use the smartphone. And that creates other types of problems. But inclusion is a multidimensional problem, and we need to work on all the solutions. But industry can do things, but not everything.
Just to comment on your comment on the role of the public sector, you might know, I mean, I don't know if you are aware of this information, but the Commission and the European Union is now supporting the deployment or the development of a constellation called IRIS-2, and this IRIS-2 system will be fueled by more than 3 billion, around 3 billion from the public side, and it's a public-private partnership, so there will be also contribution from the private side. But the idea is precisely that, is to provide global connectivity for governmental services and non-governmental services. The tenders have to be submitted in July, so you still have time if you want to participate in that. And that's precisely one of the public worry, a public concern, to provide connectivity wherever it's needed, and very much supported by the Union, the European Union institutions. So let's see how this develops, but clearly this is something which is important, yes. So next question, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. My name is Mitch Zheng. I'm with the E3, and also I'm very active in the Next Generation Alliance. And then unfortunately, my colleague Micaela, she couldn't make it today. Then when I was listening to it, I think the wonderful panelists here provided a very good insight. And I've made up my mind, when I grow up, I want to be industrial leaders. The thing that I was sitting there, I heard this R word, the regulatory, the R word, right? And then we got to be also very cautious. The R word is actually kind of double-edged sword. Without a good means, there is no way to measure that. So I can report that Micaela has been leading the team in the Green G Alliance, in the Green G working group in the NCF. We're developing the KPIs for try to provide a much more objective measurement, because actually the industry has been doing very well. Compared with the technology many years ago, the energy consumed to transmit per gigabytes is much less. But the problem is that there's really not a good way to convey this message to the industry. So I'd like to hear the viewpoint from panelists, say how we can work together to come up with some kind of measurement that the industry will follow, will be willing to follow, and the operators will be happy to see the progress. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone wants to pick that one?
Yeah, okay, so the good question. So the hard parameter, as you know, we were talking before, in the connectivity, in the fixed or in the mobile, it's already reached to 1 picojoule per bit level. So it is some 3 or 4 magnitude order compared to 3G or 2G. So from that part, it is progressing power efficiently, spectrum efficiently, very well. But then the demand is bigger. So as I mentioned, that now the facing challenge is the computing. That computing is demanding is every 2 months double. So even more slow, every 12 months or 18 months cannot handle this energy efficiency-wise. So this is another area I think will be the key. in terms of data center, the data processing, and that's the, I think that's the area. And then there's one thing that Eric mentioned, is the whole life cycle wise. It's not potentially, it's not the telecom industry, but it's involving the entire life cycle. So that's the other part we need, everybody need to do that portion.
Good. Any other comment?
No, please.
You mentioned the regulator and the opposite, the self-regulation, right? So the regulator needs to come in to protect society goals. And the ultimate goal is CO2 reduction. So a very simple metric, what is the power consumption and how much power is generated by renewables, I think that balance. But then the data center, which is a big problem, the power consumption of the data center, I think this actually is a self-regulation because power consumption is a significant part of the total cost of ownership. So there's an incentive to reduce that power consumption, and there's lots of research in data centers to reduce that, both on the cooling side, on the compute side. So there's also self-regulation here. Again, to my earlier word, green is also the color of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Toon, please. Go ahead.
Also on energy efficiency, to what extent does also the application industry play a role? Because lots of the bits that we're transporting over the network are related to video and this kind of content. And you can see, let's say you get your video of your cat or your mobile phone now, and then in 6G time it will be ultra high definition video of the cat. There's many more bits being sent. There's much more data being processed in the cloud. You can argue, is there much more use of this? Yeah. Is there also an idea on the application side, hey, maybe we need to be more efficient on how to give services or applications to the customers?
Yeah, I think you're pointing on a very good thing here. It's a clear of these rebound effects, right? We make the transmission of these bits much more efficient, and then as a consequence of that, we use it so much more. And then in the end, we are staying on this flattish energy consumption. So an optimization across the different layers, I think would be very welcome, of course.
Can I add on this? This is actually a good point in terms of application. There was a study 2 years ago from MIT. The title is, there is a lot of room on the top. So that means the language, the programming language and the software-wise is much more, let's say, less sustainability friendly. They are more and more not efficient, but it is user-friendly, but not, let's say, energy consumption friendly. So they were estimating almost 1 million of times of improvement of the software application level of software. So that was a very interesting study in terms of software efficiency.
Good. Excellent. You want to add something? Or? Yeah?
Yeah, there are certainly optimizations to be done in the way the applications are designed. Then the thing is, how do you provide an incentive for the developers to be more careful about the number of bits that they inject in our networks? And also, we know that the traffic increase is generated by, let's say, two main factors today. One is the fact that because indeed there is not much technical limitations in increasing the quality of the videos or the number of videos that you can embed into a web page, then developers do it. And the other fact is the still increasing number of subscribers. A new subscriber generates new traffic. And these are the two factors which have been driving the traffic increase so far. But then in the future, you will have machines coming in that will be also connected. You will have connected video cameras, for instance. And that, how much they will add to the traffic is difficult to predict today. That means that even though we optimize the human applications, still we will get a lot of improvements, but we need also to work on the machines applications.
Okay, I think we don't have much more time, so sorry, we will not take an additional question. But I would like just to ask one more question to the panel, because it seems that from the various discussions which have been taking place over the last few days, there is a lot of belief that AI in networks is a game changer for 6G. Today, we can see that there are already a number of implementation or intentions to implement AI in 5G through the RAN intelligent controller, for instance, or through the NW-DAF interface in the core. There are a number of attempts. Now, maybe in the future, the things have to be more end-to-end. So how do you see the contribution of AI in the network? Is it just for network management or to better automatize? Or is it to provide additional services to the customers and in such a way that the operators can monetize computing capabilities, AI-based computing capabilities towards, let's say, potential customers? Or is it only something which is at the level of the overall management of the platforms? How do you see this future implementation of AI in 6G?
Yeah, I can start. I think I agree on all the examples that you mentioned, but I can add two more, I think. And one is how we are going to develop and deploy these networks. And the capabilities of having that more data-driven will increase the capability of sort of evolving the networks. And using AI in the development process will make sort of developer more efficient, and we will be able to sort of address more functionality in a more cost-efficient way, I think. So that's also an important thing, our capability of developing and deploying these networks. Then I think we will not only use AI on this management layer or higher layers. I think we will use it also on lower layers in the network. And it will be very interesting to explore how much we can gain by sort of identifying sort of channel estimation or other sort of very fundamental things and the improvement potential there. So I think we will see AI in all different parts of the network.
Yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. So what I would add is then architect also the network such that you fully leverage the power of the AI, that you enable the sharing of data, the sharing of AI models. There's a lot of knowledge in that AI. Do that in a secure way across multiple players, not only for the network orchestration, but there's actually a lot of useful data also for the applications. And how do you expose that and monetize that value that you're creating with the network in a secure and trustful way?
Okay, so we are back to the question of exposing the capabilities of the network towards the higher layers.
And data is a resource. It's also a capability that you're exposing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. One more thing that for the near term, yes, the AI to make management operation more efficient. It's network itself like a self-driving network without a lot of human intervene to optimize network. That's the near term. But if you look at the AI, people's vision that they can actually do is the network generate another network. These are a full automation potentially. It's the key. The new thing is the generative AI to apply to the network. That will potentially open many really open new application because it is taking the high level of the intent or requirement, and it's full automated process rather than, we engineer a network as of today.
Eric, AI for the operators?
Yes, so AI clearly has a lot of potential. We have many projects on AI, how we can use it to help the management, reduce the burden on our colleagues. And probably we will find AI in more or less all the layers of the network at some point, but provided that we can understand what AI is doing. Because we certainly don't want to leave an AI who does whoever knows what in the control of our network. So that's why the work which is being done on explainable AI, particularly in ExaX, is so important. And another thing we need to be careful about is also the energy consumption for training the models.
And the security.
And the security, absolutely.
It goes together. Okay, so a lot of faith on AI for managing all sorts of resources in the network. Now, a bit more open in terms of extra application capabilities towards the potential users. So I think we have exceeded the time, and it went a bit too fast, but okay, sorry for that. I think we have got a few good ideas on what we can expect in terms of applications for 6G, sustainability, AI. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go through all the possible questions that this domain is raising, because there are quite a few. Even yesterday in a full-day workshop of ExaX, I think it was still questions to come. So I suggest that we give a big hand to our panelists and thank them very much for their participation. Many thanks.